I was bruised, but my ribs were not cracked. They were not broken. I went to the doctor immediately. Frank Gatson drove me. I was not hospitalized. Both my doctors in LA and Chicago cleared me to perform, but said to take care, obviously. And above all, I fought back.
That was Jussie Smollett at the Troubadour just days after his alleged attack on Tuesday, January 29th. That was actually 2 weeks ago tonight. In the video, he was speaking directly to the audience to clear up some of the rumors that were circling regarding the ordeal. Now he is making headlines again. Since there are so many different outlets reporting on this right now, I've got Brandon Jeffrey on from the ET News Desk joining me now to help me break everything down. Brendan, thanks for joining us. This story has had lots of twists and turns. Can you tell us where we currently are?
Right, and we've been following this story from the beginning. As you mentioned there, it's been a very fluid situation. Right now, CBS News is reporting that their sources are telling them that Jussie actually orchestrated this alleged attack that happened over 2 weeks ago in Chicago with these two suspects that were in custody up until Friday evening. We reported, obviously, on Friday that those men were released from custody. They are the two men that are actually in this surveillance video here that you are looking at. And Jussie actually even said when he was on GMA with Robin Roberts earlier this past week that he believed that those two men in the video were his attackers. So police detectives finally were able to find these two men, and at first they were referring to them as persons of interest. Then, over the next several hours, it shifted, and the police took them into custody and arrested them on Wednesday night at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. Reportedly, the two men were returning from a trip to Nigeria, and police met them, reportedly, according to other reports, at customs when they arrived at O'Hare on Wednesday night. Now, from Wednesday night until about late Friday night, these two brothers, who again are of Nigerian descent, met with detectives in Chicago, spoke with them along with their attorney, and provided police, according to police, with new evidence and new leads in the case. So by Friday evening, we were hearing from Chicago police that these two brothers and their attorneys provided new evidence with police. So that gave police enough evidence that they felt like they were okay releasing these two brothers that they had had in custody for the past 48 plus hours. So they released them, which meant even though they were arrested, they were released and they were not charged. And they were no longer looked at as suspects, according to the victims, or those two men, according to those two men's attorneys. Now, we can confirm, this is what Chicago police told us as of Saturday evening. Quote, "We can confirm the information we received from the individuals questioned by police earlier in the Empire case has in fact shifted the trajectory of the investigation. We've reached out to the Empire cast member's attorney to request a follow-up interview." Now, Tanner, that is from the chief of communications for the Chicago Police Department. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing here. This basically means Chicago police, this is them confirming to us that they received new information from these two Nigerian brothers and their attorneys yesterday. So at this point now, police are going back and they're clearly following new leads in the case. What those leads are, we don't know. We've obviously been in touch with police and sources and trying to find new information. It's important to note again, though, that we cannot independently confirm what CBS News is reporting, but CBS News is basically reporting per their sources that Jussie Smollett in some way allegedly orchestrated this attack with these two brothers back about over 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow. It's a very difficult thing to hear, obviously, because of sort of the rallying that has a lot of the rallying that's come about this on social media, all the voices of support for Jussie, and then to find out that, especially to find out from someone as credible as the chief of communications for the Chicago PD, that they are shifting the course of this investigation.
Right, absolutely. And it is important to note that obviously we've heard from Chicago police and they've told us their statement, the latest statement coming in late Saturday evening. But it's also important to note that we have also reached out to Jussie's personal reps. He has a couple of those, and they have not replied to requests for comment on this latest information. It's also important to reach out that we reached out to Fox. That is the network that Jussie's show Empire airs on, and Fox reps declined to comment to ET on these latest developments that came down on Saturday. It's also important to note that Jussie is currently being represented by 2 Chicago attorneys. Now, late Friday night, we were told that Jussie was now being represented by a high-powered Chicago defense attorney, Michael Monaco. Michael Monaco is actually the attorney, one of the attorneys for President Donald Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen. Now, Michael Monaco, the defense attorney, confirmed to us late Friday night on the record that he was, in fact, now representing Jussie. Now, Jussie's reps on Saturday have come back to us and told us on the record that Michael Monaco is not representing Jussie. So this is such a fluid situation. Why we were told he was representing him, and now we're being told he's not. You know what I mean? There's so many pieces of this puzzle. You and I have talked about this many times in the last 2 weeks, and this has just been such a fluid situation, and that's why we're picking and choosing what we report and, being very cautious. And we're kind of waiting for those on the record statements, from these top officials within the police department.
Yeah, I know at one point Chicago actually delayed a press conference because they had a mass shooting and they wanted to, obviously take care of the families and the victims of that in respect to this case. Can you speak at all to the location of Ola and Abel, the Nigerian brothers, sort of at the center of all this now, with their whereabouts?
We don't know that. I mean, I've put out multiple calls today, Saturday, on this to their attorneys. She has not gotten back to me. We briefly emailed earlier, and she mentioned it's obviously been a busy time for her, and she's making sure she gets to everyone when she can. But again, it just goes back to we're trying to get these statements from all of these people involved in this case on the record. It's the best way to make sure we're getting everyone the most reliable, updated information. We don't know their whereabouts. All we do know, though, is that as of Friday evening, they were no longer considered suspects. Police said they cooperated with investigators. We know that they were interrogated by the Chicago PD detectives for several hours. I mean, they were with them for almost 2 days in interrogations, but there was something, Tanner, in those interrogations, somewhere within those 48 plus hours, where either one of those brothers or both of them said something to investigators that gave them new leads that allowed investigators to release them and no longer consider them suspects or persons of interest in this case. And their attorney, said that to one of the CBS Chicago local stations last night, that they were no longer suspects. They were no longer considered persons of interest. So it's very clear, based on the statement that we received from Chicago police on Saturday and from what that attorney said yesterday to the affiliates in Chicago, is that they are following some kind of a new lead in this case, and they know something that they are not telling us yet.
I can speak to some of it. I'm looking at reporting here from TMZ. One law enforcement officer told TMZ that one of the brothers, or at least one of the brothers, I should say, turned over his phone, and that on that phone there was a record of a call between him and Jussie in the vicinity of the attack, but before it happened. And I feel like what you were just saying, the information that these young men gave the officers, I think, dramatically, to say the least, changed the tone of this investigation. Brendan, I know you were in Chicago covering this not too long ago, and I know you walked the path, you were in the neighborhood. What was your feeling when you were there? Was there ever a point at which, just walking around, that you ever felt unsafe? I guess I'm just trying to ask, how did it feel when you were there?
You know, it's a really nice part of Chicago. I will say I had never been to Chicago before we had gone out there to cover this story. Some of the footage you're looking at now. So this is the tunnel. This tunnel that you're looking at, which includes this camera that you're looking at, is actually directly below the residence where Jussie lives. His residence is actually adjacent, directly connected to the Lowe's Hotel, Chicago. So you have the hotel, the Lowe's, and then you have his residence basically next to each other, and this tunnel is directly below it. Now, we went down to that tunnel with our correspondent Courtney Tesno, and that's where we shot some of our stand-ups one day, and there's people walking around. It's a very busy area. There's not only businesses, but, you know, we saw trucks coming and going from that tunnel, delivering different items, whatever, to the hotel and the residents there at a loading dock. We saw people walking around because across the street from that tunnel, on the back end of the building, is actually a high-end apartment complex. On the other side of the street, on that same back street, is an Irish pub. So this isn't just a back street that is empty with people. I mean, there were people walking around, and you have to remember that we were there during the polar vortex. We're talking negative 20 degrees at night, but there were still people walking around. It's not a street. You know, there some city streets you walk down them and you never see anyone. This is a city street that you can tell is well traveled, and by looking at this footage, you can see several different surveillance cameras positioned in the area. I know that from my own personal, note-taking when we were there and looking around, for cameras to count and see if we could see how many there were, there was a camera on a telephone pole. There was a camera near the loading dock, near that tunnel. There was another camera on the other side of the street intersection.
Hey,
yeah, what's up?
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We've actually just received a statement from Jussie's attorneys, and you'll be hearing this the same time I am as I read this aloud. This is from Todd Pugh and Victor Henderson, attorneys for Jussie Smollett, and they said, quote, "As a victim of a hate crime who has cooperated with the police investigation, Jussie Smollett is angered and devastated by recent reports that the perpetrators are individuals he is familiar with. He has now been further victimized by claims attributed to these alleged perpetrators that Jussie played a role in his own attack. Nothing is further from the truth, and anyone claiming otherwise is lying." They go on to say, one of these purported suspects was Jussie's personal trainer, who he hired to ready him physically for a music video. It is impossible to believe that this person could have played a role in the crime against Jussie or would falsely claim Jussie's complicity. Jussie and his attorneys anticipate being further updated by the Chicago PD on the status of the investigation and will continue to cooperate. At the present time, Jussie and his attorneys have no inclination to respond to, quote, unnamed sources inside of the investigation, but will continue discussions through official channels. And that is the end of their statement.
News to me, like you just broke this to me, like you had mentioned. Very interesting statement. Obviously, they feel strongly about what they're stating in that statement. Again, this is assuming, this statement assuming is response to multiple outlets, including CBS News, reporting per their own sources that Jussie in some way allegedly orchestrated this attack with these two Nigerian brothers, and that these two Nigerian brothers were released last night from being arrested from Chicago police because them and their attorneys allegedly provided some kind of information to authorities, detectives involved in this case. I mean, Tanner, you have to remember, and we've reported this in the past, Chicago police have assigned 12 detectives to this case. 12 detectives, that's a lot of detectives. You're looking at an incident that, is being currently called a hate crime, an incident that involves a high-profiled public figure. So you can imagine, part of the reason why these 12 detectives have been working on the case is because of that. 12 detectives have looked over hours and hours of surveillance video, several camera angles, trying to find it. And, we've reported how they have found multiple camera angles of Jussie walking in the area of where the alleged attack took place on that Tuesday night. However, detectives cannot turn up any video after they've gone through all of this video. They can't turn up any video of this alleged attack on camera. It's just, these two men in that really one surveillance video that we've ever seen in the last 2 weeks, that one picture of, at the time, police were calling them persons of interest, that transitioned to potential suspects. They were classifying them as potential suspects. And as of Friday evening, those two guys were released from police custody, and they were on their way, free men. These two guys in that photo that you're looking at there. And as you know, that's the only photo that police have released to us. It's not like they've given us any other video. Also, Tanner, it's really interesting to note, when I was in Chicago and I was, talking to people in Chicago, they made a really good point, and this has been reported. Chicago is known to have one of the biggest, I should say, security systems in the United States. They have some of the most cameras, city cameras, business cameras, private property cameras. So for them, it's tricky for detectives, for them to say, we have so many cameras in the city. How are they not finding this footage of an attack, knowing there's so many cameras on that intersection where this attack allegedly happened?
Right. It sounds so gross to say, but if it's weird because we're sort of put in a scenario where our best case hope at this point is that a hate crime was committed, because if that is not what we find out to be the truth, then the trust and respect of fans and victims of attacks of this nature around the entire world will have been betrayed by Jussie Smollett. And so that is, I think, the sadder truth of the information that we're receiving today. Brendan, thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about this more in the coming days.
We'll keep you posted. Thanks, Tanner.
Thank you. As we said earlier, this story continues to evolve. Stick with ET Live for the latest developments in the Smollett case.